this fraud goes. It's extraordinary. I don't understand why people like him aren't in prison. But I want to applaud you, Ms. Bernstein, for doing your job. And I think it is absolutely shameful that you have been retaliated against and treated like scum when you are a 20-year civil servant, proud Minnesotan, just doing your job. I don't know what your politics are. I don't think it matters. I'm sure it didn't matter to you when you did your job, and yet you're treated like that. And meanwhile, people like Ellison are feted and lauded, and he's a star in his party. It's unbelievable. He's a crook. It's exceptional. We need more people like you who are doing their jobs and who are fighting for the public and fighting for what is right and true and just. And I want to thank you for coming forward.
Josh Hawley just delivered one of the sharpest moments of the hearing. After a longtime state employee described retaliation for exposing suspicious contracts and fraud concerns, Hawley turned directly toward allegations involving Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. And the room instantly shifted. The hearing quickly became a broader debate about accountability, oversight, and who really knew what was happening behind the scenes.
Go next to Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Bernstein, if I could just start with you. You worked in the Minnesota Department of Human Services, is that right? For
Correct.
20 years
Correct.
Or more? And at the agency there, you served in roles related to contract management and compliance. Is that
Correct.
basically right? Several years ago, looking here at your written testimony, you say that you started to notice some inconsistencies in contracts that came across your desk. Can you just describe what those inconsistencies or irregularities were, what they looked like?
It was anything from obvious conflicts of interest to large advances being given. If the contract was for $3 or $4 million, we were giving $1 million advances before any work had occurred. That is a very risky thing to do. A business can just close up and they've got your money and they haven't done a thing for you. There was...
To whom were these, if I might ask, to whom were these advances going? What kind of entities, do you recall? What kind of entities were we talking about?
So states do not, in general, do their own social services. They do not do services for the residents of their state. They contract out that work to most often nonprofits, occasionally profits, but most often nonprofits. And so those are then considered grant contracts. And those grant contracts are well regulated in statute, well defined in statute, and we were doing many things that were not compliant with statute. There would be a contract with a dollar amount that had no formula, nothing that I could find that would establish why that dollar amount was.
Could you detect a pattern in these inconsistencies?
In general, no, but I did notice a slight preference for our tribes. Our tribes were one situation where I saw contracts that no one could explain to me why they were the dollar amount that they were.
What happened when you reported these inconsistencies to your superiors?
I was called racist, and then I was walked out. There was quite a smear campaign. I was investigated. I have about 400 pages of investigatory information about me.
You'd worked there for 20 years at this point. I mean, you have
Yes.
a long track record.
Yes.
As a civil servant, as a public servant. You bring this to the attention of your supervisors, as you are supposed to do, and it sounds to me like you were retaliated against. I mean, is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, absolutely.
And how did this end? I mean, how long did this go on? What was the result of it?
It actually still goes on. This started for me 7 years ago, but I am still just shuffled from one job to another. A supervisor about a year ago said, well, we have to find you something else to do now. So now I redact documents. I have 9 years of college, and I put black marks on documents for media requests.
Do you think, in light of the revelations of widespread fraud and abuse in the state, that maybe there's a systemic problem in state government that you exposed in part, but that probably extends far beyond you? I mean, is that fair to say?
There absolutely is, and I now realize that it was long before me.
Are you familiar with the case of Keith Ellison?
Yes.
Keith Ellison testified under oath before a committee of this body not long ago and insisted to me that he had never done anything wrong and didn't know anything about any of the fraud and abuse. The only problem is that there are records, tape recordings of various fraudsters coming to see him associated with the scandals that the chairwoman was just talking about a moment ago, coming to see him, complaining about people, I think in your department. The fraudsters were saying, oh, we're getting pushback. Who knows? Maybe it was you. We're getting investigated. Can you do something about it? And Ellison said, oh, well, I'll see what I can do. And they offered him campaign contributions, and he took them, unbelievably. And we know this is all true because they recorded it all. It's a problem when you work with scumbags. They'll double-cross you just like they'll double-cross anybody. The whole thing is on tape. I can't think of a greater instance of abuse of public trust. And if your own attorney general was doing it, who knows how deep, how far, how wide this fraud goes. This is extraordinary. I don't understand why people like him aren't in prison. But I want to applaud you, Ms. Bernstein, for doing your job. And I think it is absolutely shameful that you have been retaliated against and treated like scum when you are a 20-year civil servant, proud Minnesotan, just doing your job. I don't know what your politics are. I don't think it matters. I'm sure it didn't matter to you when you did your job, and yet you're treated like that. And meanwhile, people like Ellison are feted and lauded, and he's a star in his party. It's unbelievable. He's a crook. It's exceptional. We need more people like you who are doing their jobs and who are fighting for the public and fighting for what is right and true and just. And I want to thank you for coming forward, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing.
The Senate hearing began as a discussion about fraud oversight in Minnesota's Department of Human Services, but it quickly evolved into a much larger debate about accountability inside state government. Senator Josh Hawley focused heavily on testimony from a longtime public employee who claimed she discovered major irregularities involving contracts, nonprofit funding, and large financial advances issued without sufficient oversight. Her testimony painted a picture of a bureaucracy where raising concerns allegedly came with professional consequences instead of serious investigation. What made the hearing especially significant was the witness's background. She wasn't a political activist or a recent hire. She had reportedly worked inside the department for more than 2 decades. According to her testimony, she repeatedly tried to alert supervisors about questionable financial practices, including contracts with unclear funding formulas and unusually large advances paid before services were performed. Instead of receiving support, she described being marginalized, reassigned, and subjected to investigations herself. That aspect of the hearing shifted attention toward the treatment of whistleblowers inside government agencies. The most dramatic moment came when Hawley connected the testimony to broader allegations involving Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Hawley referenced recordings and public allegations suggesting individuals connected to fraud investigations sought political help while discussing campaign donations. The senator framed the situation as a deeper institutional failure, arguing that if high-ranking officials were aware of concerns yet failed to act decisively, the issue could extend far beyond isolated misconduct. The intensity of Hawley's language immediately elevated the political stakes of the hearing. Beyond the headlines and heated rhetoric, the hearing reflected a growing national debate over government oversight and public trust. Many lawmakers across both parties increasingly emphasize the importance of transparency in taxpayer-funded programs, especially when large nonprofit contracts and emergency funding mechanisms are involved. The witness's testimony also raised broader concerns about whether internal compliance systems are functioning effectively when employees believe reporting misconduct may damage their careers rather than solve problems. By the end of the exchange, the hearing had become less about one individual case and more about institutional credibility. Hawley positioned the witness as an example of someone attempting to uphold accountability inside government while facing resistance from the very system she served. Supporters of the hearing argue these investigations are necessary to restore public confidence, while critics may view some of the rhetoric as politically charged. Either way, the exchange is likely to continue drawing attention because it combined allegations of fraud, whistleblower retaliation, and political accountability into one of the most confrontational moments of the hearing.